Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. My name is Rick Butler. Joined with me, as always, that is Ryan Shumpert. Today is Tuesday, April the 8th. We are recording in the morning here. A big spring happening on Rocky Top, and boy, have we been around for a lot of it. Ryan and I just got back from the, Tour Day March, if you will, the one that went to Nashville, Lexington, and Indianapolis. Where in the world were we? Meanwhile, Jack Foster has been back here covering a lot of Tennessee baseball. Ryan, you've gotten right back into the baseball swing. How are you doing? It's obviously it's March and November. Those are kind of the two big crossover times, but we're certainly in the thick of it there for a little while at the end of the month.
Yeah, no, for sure. And almost a little bit of a different feel now with, what we'll talk about mostly today, the transfer portal, how busy that's been, and doing obviously a lot of baseball. So, no, doing well. Glad to be back into a little bit of a rhythm back at home in Knoxville, but a lot to get to, and certainly been an exciting few months for Tennessee athletics.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it is as we approach the summertime, as we approach the break from this sort of academic / sports calendar, there's a lot for Tennessee fans to reflect on and be happy about, be encouraged by. Obviously, some things that they want to be better. And then there's also a Tennessee baseball season that we have yet to see where that goes. So a lot coming up, but a lot sort of on our doorstep right now. Again, we've talked about Tennessee baseball. That is one of the two housekeeping notes that we have. Be sure to go check out the RTI Diamond Pass. That's giant. That is Jack and Ryan's sort of spinoff of the RTI Press Pass, where they're talking all things Tennessee baseball. One, if not both of them, are there at every single game, no matter pretty much where Tennessee is. They've got you the best news, notes, and insight on the Tennessee baseball team. Again, you can find that on YouTube if you're watching this video right now, or you can find it wherever you are subscribed to the RTI Press Pass. Again, that is the Diamond Pass. And then the second little bit of piece of housekeeping is, Ryan, I want to go back to Friday. Jacoby Gillespie was not the only big announcement that was made. Now, I have, weirdly enough, less information to give about this one than I think we do Gillespie. But Rocky Top Insider was proud to announce a new partnership that is going to be coming basically on the horizon here soon. We have a lot of details that are going to start to unfold as the summer months go on, certainly getting you ready for football season. But on Friday, we announced a new partnership with WATE TV, Channel 6, on your side. I like that slogan that we are very, very excited about. Again, can't talk about too much about what's going to happen. All that will start to unfold in the coming months. But we did make the big announcement on Friday. Rocky Top Insider and Channel 6 partnering up. A lot more content coming your way.
Yeah, as you said, on your side. We are also on your side.
We're there too.
But we are also
there
on
too.
your side.
We're next to we're next to them.
We're on the
other side.
No, we're on the same side.
Okay.
We're on the side that the people are on. WAT is on the right. Rocky Top Insider's on the left.
Nice.
We're on the same side. Yeah.
We're on the same side.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're flanking the people.
Good way to put it.
Yeah.
The people are getting flanked with sports coverage from this new partnership. It's
with people that are on their side.
Yeah, with people that are on their side. Never forget
a very important note.
We're on your side. Let it be known.
That is exactly right.
We were on your side previously, but not in this sort of way. Now it's a different way.
We're even more on your side.
We're even more. We got a little bit more snug.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Channel 6 has a phenomenal team that works for them, and we are very excited to be partnering up many good friends over there. So, again, be on the lookout for that. I'm sure Channel 6 will be talking about it plenty on their social medias and on their website. We're going to be talking about it more on our side of things, but that is just a fun thing to look forward to as the summer months start to roll on. Ryan, am I missing anything else? I mean, Diamond Pass on your side. Am I missing anything else before we get into the business?
I think from a housekeeping standpoint, I guess no football today's podcast. Spring game this weekend. We'll have some football stuff fall out of that next week in that podcast. So no football this week, but we'll have some of that coming down the pipe as Tennessee puts a bow on spring practice this weekend.
It'll be a busy weekend. Not only does Tennessee have the orange and white game, obviously we're tracking all this Tennessee basketball movement at the same time. Tennessee baseball also goes on the road to Ole Miss. Going to be a little bit of a homecoming for Liam Doyle and Andrew Fisher, is it not? Or am I maybe a week ahead?
No, you're right. It'll be much must-watch TV, especially on Friday night. And man, Ole Miss, man, they were supposed to be one of the worst teams in the SEC entering the year, and I believe in D1 baseball's rankings, they come into this weekend series just a spot behind Tennessee. So an Ole Miss team that's been a lot better than expected. Tennessee looking to bounce back from a rough weekend. Should be a really entertaining series down in Oxford.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you about that weekend, but we don't have enough time for it. If you want to go back and hear Ryan and Jack's thoughts on, oh boy, the no-hitter followed by a Saturday 2-game doubleheader sweep, Ryan and Jack break it down in the latest episode of the RTI Diamond Pass, so go ahead and check that out. All right, let's move into a little bit of basketball. Ryan, we're going to talk about the 2 transfer portal pickups that Tennessee basketball picked up here in the last couple of days, but I just sort of wanted to ask you first, when the season ended, and I even go back a little bit before that. You go back to senior day, and if you weren't fully in tune with just who Tennessee's senior class were, you got a really good idea of it during senior day. You saw all that productivity on the court, holding up their jersey in a frame. It was Jemai Mashak, it was Akai Ziegler, it was Jordan Gainey, it was Igor Milicic. It was a lot of production. What were sort of your thoughts on what Tennessee needed heading into this period that would be the transfer portal period? Again, we're going to talk about a point guard and a forward that Tennessee's picked up, but where were you sort of before and leading into some of this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot in
Yeah,
short. There wasn't much they didn't need. But I think the priority one was they needed to get a really good point guard. I think that was the top thing. And then number two, they just needed shooting across the board. I mean, you talk about Tennessee returns 4 players. 3 of those guys are big men that can't really shoot from the perimeter. Bishop Boswell, the other, not a very good shooter. Don't believe he made a 3-point shot this season. And then you look at the 3 guys Tennessee has coming in, and who knows what the varying roles of those guys will be. But none of those come to Tennessee with the reputation as being a sharpshooter. None of them are
sure.
known for their 3-point shooting. So I think that was the 2 things that were top priority, and certainly Tennessee was just going to need a lot of bodies, in which they've gotten a jump start adding 2, and they won't be done either. They'll need to add a handful of more bodies too before things are all said and done.
The first player that Tennessee picked up from the portal, a little bit of a homecoming. He spent 2 years at Belmont before going to Maryland. Point guard by the name of Jacoby Gillespie. Tennessee picked up that commitment on Friday night. And you talked about one of, if not the biggest priority being a replacement for Zakai Ziegler, the guy who's sort of been the engine of this program for the last 3 years. That's not an easy spot to fill. I think Tennessee did it as best as they could, picking up Jacoby Gillespie out of Maryland, a true point guard and a guy who has experience, a guy that has a crafty and versatile game. But I think when you talk about basketball and you talk about the guard game, point guards, true point guards are harder to find. They're a little bit more rare. A guy who can lead that offense, who can distribute. I actually remember Kelvin Sampson sitting there in that Kelvin Sampson press conference when he was talking about, I think it was Milos Uzan, and saying that, hey, that was their transfer portal pickup last year because they needed a true point guard. They didn't need another shooting guard necessarily. They needed a guy who could facilitate things. And I think that's what Tennessee picked up with Jacoby Gillespie, a true point guard who's got a really nice knack for shooting as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's a top 10 prospect in the portal by really any rankings. One of the very best players in the portal, and one that Tennessee really needed to get from what you mentioned and what I talked about with just the need at that spot. How important of a position that is to Rick Barnes. I think we've seen it in a different light, I guess, in recent years because of how much he likes Zakai Ziegler, and we've seen him talk about how much he likes Zakai Ziegler and how it's going to be tough to go back to coaching without him. But you go back before, and in some of those other teams, you see just how important point guard play is to him. Maybe on the other side, when Tennessee doesn't have great point guard play, and the frustration that can lend to him. So, as Gillespie said, multiple times, and Barnes said a version of this in his statement when Gillespie officially signed on Monday. He's handed him the keys. It's going to be Gillespie's show. I think it's a guy really Tennessee had to have, frankly, when you're talking about trying to get back to the top 4, competing to finish in the top 4, top 5 in the SEC. So just a huge get, a guy that is, a true point guard. I think still growing in that regard because he played a little bit more combo guard at Belmont.
Sure.
But a really good scorer, which Tennessee obviously needs. None of the guys they bring back are big-time scorers. And I mentioned it shooting. He made, I think it was 87 3-pointers last season at a 40% clip. So a really good shooter too, and someone who did it in probably the second best conference, maybe the third best conference in the country last year. So you're not worried about the step up or how it translates. You have a pretty good feel for what that's going to look like already.
Yeah, 6'1", so he is a little bit bigger than Zakai Ziegler off the bat. But he averaged 14.7 points last year, 2.8 rebounds per game, and then 5.0 assists per game. He's certainly a distributor of the basketball. He's great at passing. You look at some of the highlights of his games, and I think that's easily recognizable. But the biggest thing that stands out, like you're alluding to, is that shooting. Looked at some of the stats earlier. I believe it was 27% of his field goal attempts have come at the rim. 27% of his career field goal attempts have come from the right side of the three-point arc. So those are definitely two places that he likes to try to score the ball from. But if you talk about a point guard, to me, those are the two places you're attacking the most. You're a guy who can either try to get downhill, and I think he is a guy who can get downhill and get to the rim, whether it's off of a screen or whether he's just using a little bit of speed and finesse off the top of the key. But then also a guy who can step back and hit the three-point shot. And it's not just being able to sort of step back and hit the three-point shot. Brian, he's got one of my favorite things in all of college basketball, and that's jimmer range. I know that might be a lot to say or a high expectation, but the point being is that he can step back and he can hit some deep three-pointers. I'll be interested to see if maybe he can hit one from the end of the Tennessee logo. Maybe the where was Jemai Mashak's buzzer beater was around the tee of the summit. I think it was sort of right there around midcourt.
In the summit. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe if he can get around to the logo range, but the deep 3-point shooting was something that especially caught my eye. Just it's hard not to when it's that good, but that's kind of what I think of when I think of point guard scoring.
Yeah, no, and I can't even. This is upsetting that I can't give these guys proper credit, but there is a YouTube account that does just a fantastic job of putting transfer portal highlights on YouTube.
I believe it is College Basketball Scouting.
That's it. That's exactly it.
It's fantastic.
And it has some good numbers that kind of accompany it too. And I can't remember what the exact number was, but it was something like 15 to 20 made 3-pointers from 25 plus feet. So so a lot of range. He hit some really deep ones last season. And when you talk about spacing, I mean, that's just going to be a big question for Tennessee's team as a whole. When you can make them from that far deep. I mean, you saw it this year with Chaz Lanier, where teams had to come out and guard him really, really deep. That just opens up the court for a lot of other things that you can try to get to at the rim.
Okay, so what else about Jacoby Gillespie's game is complementary to not only sort of what Tennessee has on the roster right now, but the style that Tennessee plays? Obviously, we know that screens are a big portion of what Tennessee does, whether it's the off-ball screen or the on-ball screen. We don't exactly know how Tennessee's roster is going to finish up. They've got a couple more spots to work with, but how do you see his play style? You said it a second ago, he's going to have the keys to this offense. How do you see his play style working alongside what Rick Barnes and his staff wants to do?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing, the instance or action that Tennessee runs that I think you'll see him get a ton of looks on, especially if Tennessee, can go land a good 2-guard or 3 wing player. But Tennessee kind of runs that floppy action with we'll say this past year, Chaz Lanier, we'll say Dalton Connect, because I can think of specifically there was one of the plays in the Creighton run that was this. He comes off of a pin down, catches the ball, starts driving. Zakai has passed him the ball from the top of the key, and then he, we'll say he's coming off to the right elbow or right wing. Zakai relocates to the left elbow as Dalton drives in, draws the help from Zakai's guy who's closer there, and then passes it to Zakai for an open elbow 3. Tennessee runs that action all the time. Zakai got a ton of threes. It's probably, I think, the highest percentage he maybe shot on a specific action. That's where I think Jacoby Gillespie should be great. He has just phenomenal spot up catch and shoot numbers. I think he ranked in the 97th percentile in that last year. He hit, as a point guard, as you kind of expect, he hit the vast majority of his threes kind of wing to wing, not a ton in the corners, and shot at a really high clip at those spots. I want to say one of them, estimated field goal percentage, was like 51%, and the other one was around like 40 left and right wing. I can't remember exactly which one was which, but I think you'll see him get a ton of shots off of that. You mentioned it. I don't think necessarily pick and roll or ball screen, ball handler is necessarily a strength of his game, but it's something that he certainly can do at a decent clip too. So I think you'll see that again in late shot clock situations. And I guess the other thing I just note on him that we haven't, I think he's a pretty good defender too. Especially, I know somebody who knows basketball well and watched him a ton at Belmont and said he was just an elite defender, an elite on-ball defender at that level. And certainly it goes down a bit as he faces better athleticism in the Big Ten and SEC, but he still had really good numbers, defensive numbers last year. His steal numbers were high. I think his steal rate was even maybe higher than Zakai Ziegler's, not quite as high as Jemai Mashak's. It was in that mix right around where both those guys were. I don't think he's quite when you're talking about Zakai's standpoint, a guy that's going to pick you up 94 feet, and you talk about Jemai Mashak's standpoint, a guy that can take a best opposing player out of the game. So he's not that level of defender, but he's a guy that is a good defender and is a plus defender. And I think that's really important because of what Tennessee is losing in Zakai and Jemai and trying to mitigate what a potential drop-off defensively is going to look like this season. Having someone on the ball that's a good defender, I think is probably going to be overlooked with this pickup because of the more flashy numbers, but it's also very important.
Well, and you talked about it when we started talking about his offensive game. You said he's a really talented player that you think still has a little bit more room to grow and still kind of, grow into his game. I would imagine that's true on the defensive side of the ball as well, especially with the coaching that Tennessee brings to the table. So
agree.
You're right. I don't think he is that level of a guy who can, end up in a national defensive player of the year conversation, which, by the way, I think maybe some snubs were in order to Jemai Mashak and Zakai Ziegler, but it's neither here nor there for now. That took my train of thought. So now I'm just going to start thinking about these snubs.
You're on snub talk, snub watch.
I respect a good center. It's impossible not to respect a good center, but stands there and block. Jemai Mashak can guard up. Anyways, so he can grow into becoming a better defender, and I think that's exciting to see. But if you're a guy who can get steals at the top of the key, you need to be a guy who can be good in transition as well, and I think he does fit that mold too. So he's a complete player. That might be the easiest thing to tell somebody about his game, to kind of get your point across, is that he is a complete true point guard, and I think that is something that is really exciting for Tennessee fans to see being brought in. Considering they fully understand just how much Zakai Ziegler was a focal point of this team previously.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that aspect of how much more is there is exciting. You see all the time guys that transfer from mid-major level or low major level up to Power 5 level. You really oftentimes see a big second-year jump. I do wonder if you get that completely with Gillespie, given that he's not going to be in the same system. He won't have quite the same continuity and familiarity with what he's doing that could lend to a big second-year jump in playing into Power 5. But he will have already made those adjustments to the size, the athleticism, the speed of the game. And then obviously there's just, normal improvement. So when you talk about a guy that averaged 14.7 points and 4.8 assists, it does feel like there could potentially be another gear there.
Okay, let's keep it moving. That was Friday afternoon-ish, I believe.
Yep.
Fast forward a little bit to Sunday evening. Ryan, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go to bed. I've got my HBO show on. It's wrapping up. It's about 9:30. I'm about ready to go to bed. Sure enough, we get a big commitment that happens. Tennessee gets a transfer portal commitment from Vanderbilt forward Jaylen Carey. And what I was most impressed by on this night was how quickly we had up a Jaylen Carey interview on the Rocky Top Insider site in the immediate moments, basically following his commitment. Ryan, being one of the best in the business, was so unbelievably quick in being able to talk to Jaylen Carey about his commitment to Tennessee once the news unfolded, once it broke there late on a Sunday night. And then by the time that Monday morning rolled around, I think the Vanderbilt fan base had gotten word or had gotten wind of some of the things that he might have said on that interview with you. That one picked up a little bit of steam that night, didn't it?
Yeah, no, it did. And knew from the time he said that quote that it probably would. But yeah, I mean, shout out to Jaylen Carey, shout out to Jacoby Gillespie too. He was the same way. Both those guys were easy to get on the phone pretty quick. So high bar for the media standard for making
For
our life
whoever's next.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for whoever's next.
We're judging.
But to actually your point earlier, you were talking about going and watching the Diamond Pass podcast. People go watch that on YouTube, and you can see in the final like 5 minutes as I receive word that Jaylen Carey is committed, and I am sporadically trying to
That is
trying to get.
incredible.
I mean, I had the story pre-written, but I'm
Jack,
trying to get it up.
wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I also, I had my phone on do not dis- my phone was charging across the room, and I had it on do not disturb because I didn't want to get notifications on my laptop. And I guess I was looking for something on Twitter or clicking over, and I saw it. So then I'm sporadically running across the phone, across the room to get my phone, and looking to pause or wrap it up, and then was making my final point because we were very close to. We were basically already wrapping it up, so we weren't going to pause it. So I was making my final point
Way to go quick.
about the baseball weekend while searching the backlog of our WordPress to get to trying to get the story up and on social media. So
that's great.
That was a kind of a funny look behind the curtain. And no, on the Vanderbilt aspect of it, I thought it was, I don't know, funny, tough scene for Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt made the NCAA tournament this past year for the first time in 8 years. Maybe it was 7 or 8 years. It had been a minute. And their one inclusion and one shining moment was the player who just transferred to their biggest rival the day before. So that was a bit of a tough scene for the Doors.
Who also, and not publicly, as in he just posted this on Twitter, but publicly dumped them, too. It just kind of, I don't do no black, I don't do no black and gold anymore. But I won't steal the thunder from the quote.
Yeah, no, 100%. So. No, an interesting get. It really feels like this one was an easy recruitment for Tennessee in a lot of ways. Jaylen Carey was very, very interested from the jump. He talked about he committed at a Zoom call last Thursday. He committed to the staff after the Zoom call.
I was going to ask if he had even an in-person visit here.
No in-person visit. Which he is from Florida, so maybe not
sure.
quite as. And I don't know, maybe he could be in Nashville right now, still finishing up the semester. But no in-person visit, just a Zoom call, a quick commitment, and really an interesting take, I think, from a fit standpoint, and maybe a push to or a pivot to a style of play. We're going to see Tennessee play more two big lineups this year, I think, than we have in a number of years, just naturally from what their roster looks like. And you talk about 4 guys in the front court, and Felix Okpara, JP Estrella, Cade Phillips, and now Jaylen Carey. That's going to be a lot of physicality. That's going to be some big lineups. And I think you just look at that and you look at that group. I think it's going to be a very good rebounding team, just on paper. We still know a ton about this team and what it's going to look like because the roster is just not complete. But that is one thing I feel pretty confident saying at this point, that this is going to be a good rebounding team.
Yeah, when you think about Jaylen Carey, you think about 6'8", 265 pounds. Last season for the Commodores, scored 8.2 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game. To Ryan's point, talking about that increase in, you would assume, likely rebounding productivity there, and then nearly an assist per game as well. But when you think about Carey, you think about offensive rebounding, think about physicality, think about blocking, think about scoring in the paint. He is a tough, physical. Is brute a fair way to just sort of describe his style in the paint? He's a guy who can catch a rebound or catch a pass on the inside, and push guys off of him, right? Use his physicality, use his shoulders and his elbows to his advantage. There's a play I specifically remember from back in Knoxville against Cade Phillips where he kind of had his way with Cade. He moved him off of his back and was able to turn around for, I won't call it an easy sort of hook shot, but it wasn't too contested. And granted, that wasn't the only points he scored against Tennessee as well. I believe in 2 meetings he had 32 points and 17 rebounds. It's funny that he ends up on Tennessee's roster because Tennessee's staff certainly had a good look at what he does well. But Ryan, it starts and ends with that physicality, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so, and his ability to do a lot of the little scrappy things well. He's a good rebounder, particularly on the offensive side. Some, low post scoring ability, and not just elite there by any means, but more than what Tennessee has with Cade Phillips and Felix Okpara. I don't know if it's quite as much as what JP Estrella brings them. I think it's definitely not a 1-to-1 comparison. I don't think they're the same player, but a little bit of Tobe Awaka and Jaylen Carey. When you talk about that
Sure.
physicality, has pretty good touch around the rim. Staying out of foul trouble was an issue for him last year at Vanderbilt, and certainly that has been for Awaka in his career. So that's the bread and butter. He's a scrappy guy, a tough guy. He doesn't do a ton of things that are super flashy, but I think that is reason for excitement. And also, I mean, again, it's kind of to an extent like with Jaylen Carey. Again, he played like I said, with Jacoby Gillespie. Carey played his first season at James Madison as a true freshman, transferred over to Vanderbilt with Mark Byington, had a good first year there. Now a second year in the SEC, and at least 2 years of eligibility. We'll see what happens with some of the the house settlement and the potential fifth year, whether that comes this year at some point. I think it's coming, and by the time Carey's career is over. So, and look, he's obviously transferred twice in 2 years, so there's no, and this is not just with Carey, with anyone, there's no given that anybody's going to stay for 2 or 3 years at a place. But a guy that has years to grow and has been a productive player at this point, and I think has in some ways a raw skill set that can be polished. I think it's a good get for Tennessee in the immediate, and I think more than anything, there's a lot of reason for excitement down the road.
One thing that I found very interesting about Carey's involvement with Tennessee, and this was from something that you wrote, I believe, part of your interview with Jaylen Carey, is that last year, he shot the 3-point ball at a 23% clip. But Rick Barnes, it sounds like, maybe believes that there can be a little bit of adjustments to get that to a little bit of a better number. And if he does have that ability to maybe step out and find a 3-point shot every once in a while, if the defense is drawn away from Jacoby Gillespie doing something, making a cut, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe somebody's got the ball and somebody draws the defense on the other side of the court. He's a guy who could potentially even step out to the 3-point line and knock down 1 or 2 when he's got the chance. And I believe he only made something like 9 last year. And when you're talking about a 23%, that's quite a lot of attempts that didn't go in as well. But am I getting that right? That maybe that was a conversation point between the coaching staff and the player when they were sort of making this decision?
Yes, it was. To me, I think that's the big question, at least in the short term, for how he can help Tennessee, because it's just the spacing element of it. And I think that's going to be a big emphasis for Cade Phillips this offseason, is him trying to work on and improve his shot. Can he get it better? So that's a big question. I think, look, he made 9 3-pointers last year. 2 of them were banked in. So,
one was, I remember, one against Tennessee. I mean, from the top of the key, just dead on, as straight as can be, bang, bang, down. It was truly the first horizon bank was wide open that night.
I think from a best case scenario standpoint, and this is maybe even a little bit past the best case, this is maybe wildest imagination standpoint, what Jaylen Carey, at least from a shooting standpoint, maybe not the numbers as a whole, could give Tennessee next year, or what I think they would be looking for, is Thomas Howe at Florida, the white power forward for them. He averaged 9.8 points, 6.1 rebounds. He made, I want to say it was 30 something. Let's see, it was 35 3-pointers at a 34% clip. I think a perfect world for Jaylen Carey at Tennessee next year is like 9.8 points, 6 rebounds, and the 3-point shooting, I have a hard time even thinking in the wildest imagination he's going to be quite that good. But can he make 33s at a 30% clip?
Sure.
That would go just so far to making defenses respect him from the perimeter and opening up some of the stuff with the spacing. So that's the, kind of, I think, like I said, best case scenario comp for him this next year. And look, I think he has a little bit more physicality than Howe does. But the way Howe can put the ball on the floor a little bit and drive, I think Carey can do a little bit of that too. So he's a really intriguing prospect and a really intriguing fit on this roster, because I just think the way it signifies what Tennessee, or how Tennessee's going to play, maybe being a little bit different than it's been the last 2 years, where 2 years ago, Josiah Jordan-James was the starting 4-man. In this past year, obviously, Igor Milicic was a little bit of a blend because he was taller and he could rebound, and Josiah could too. But he was a taller guy, I guess I should say. But really, even I think Tennessee's best lineup down the stretch this season had Jemai Mashack playing at the 4. It was very much a small ball lineup. I think you're seeing Tennessee pivot away from that a little bit. I guess we talk about what's next for Tennessee. I think a wing that can play a little bit of small ball 4, so
Sure.
you have that ability is important for Tennessee. But as a whole, I think you're going to certainly just see with the makeup of this roster more big lineups. And a year after Tennessee was just decimated by injuries and so thin inside, I think you're seeing a clear emphasis for Tennessee not to be in that spot again.
So one thing that I want to ask you about, and you do talk about the 4 big guys that Tennessee has going into next year: 6'8" Jaylen Carey, 6'9" Cade Phillips, 6'11" Felix Okpara. But then maybe the forgotten man, and unless you're really in tune with the Tennessee social media videos, and then
Yeah.
and which you could never
He's
forget
a
about him
star.
in 1,000 years. He has his
Yeah.
own little TV show post game, and that's JP Estrella. For a guy who will be entering his 3rd year, he's a guy that maybe casual Tennessee fans might have forgotten a little bit about. He started to come up a little bit during his freshman year, sort of late in the run, but then last year missed the whole season due to injury. You often saw him on the sideline, maybe in sort of that scooter, being a lower body injury. By the time that we got in tournament time, it looked like he had ditched the scooter, but he was still in the rehab process. But you've got those 4 guys. Is it as simple as, all right, Carey and Phillips maybe are splitting the 4, Okpara and Estrella are bringing the 5, or excuse me, are splitting the 5? Just sort of, how do you, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is for maybe some of the people have forgotten about JP Estrella. How could this 4-man rotation work, do you think, for Tennessee at its most simplest form? Obviously, right now it's early April. We've got a lot of time to break down how that's going to work. But just to kind of get an overview on things with the addition of Carey and the expected return of Estrella.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Phillips and Carey are both kind of 4 men, and Estrella and Felix Okpara are 5 men. I don't really think you can play Estrella and Felix together much, but so I think that's why it's good to add someone else to the mix just in case you do have an injury or something like that. The one thing I would say or would add is Carey and Phillips can both play to 5. I mean, we saw Phillips do it
Sure.
this year. Carey had to do it at Vanderbilt because the lack of the size the Commodores had on the roster. So, yeah, I think in its simplest form, when you're seeing those 4 guys on the court together, I would think it would mostly be one of Felix and JP and one of Carey and Cade Phillips. But when you talk about versatility, being able to play in different ways, I think you could see Carey and Phillips play some at the 5 spot for Tennessee too.
Yeah, I would think so. It's going to be fascinating to see how that works. And again, one of the first thing I think about just there is, hey, that's 2-ish guys who are going to be on the court probably at the same time who are not going to be 3-point threats. What is Tennessee's guards going to continue to be able to do? It feels like maybe Tennessee's going to get more to a little bit more balanced basketball next year. And again, there's still some spots that they have to work with. But Ryan, the way that you were talking about earlier, just sort of maybe a little bit of a pivot to more of a 2 big man lineup. We saw how reliant Tennessee was on their guards last year. And I'm not knocking that by any stretch. When you've got Jordan Gainey, Zakai Ziegler, and Chaz Lanier as your scorers, and then Jemai Mashack as your, as the primary versatile defender, you're going to be using your guards a lot, right? That's pretty obvious. But it feels like maybe Tennessee's going to get to a little bit more of a balanced style next year. Would you say that's kind of the way that things are trending?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think the emphasis, my guess, and nobody's told me this, but would be on the rebounding side of it.
Okay.
Look, Tennessee was a solid rebounding team for most year. They were a good offensive rebounding team. They lost what? I could be missing 3 games in the final month of the season. They lost to Ole Miss. They lost to Florida in the SEC tournament championship game, and they lost to Houston.
Yeah.
They got crushed on the defensive glass in both those games. All 3 of those teams killed Tennessee with offensive rebounds. Tennessee rebounds the ball well. They definitely win the Ole Miss game. They have great chance to win the Florida game, and the Houston game probably doesn't matter. But I think you see that being something that's a direct answer or response to some of those struggles.
Anything else on just sort of Tennessee basketball news and notes? just broke down the two guys who have committed to Tennessee. And I think just on that note, real quick, I will say, because I don't know if Gillespie had a portal or had a visit either in person. Obviously, he is a guy who's very familiar with the program. But either way, I think that when you talk about being able to land these two guys and just sort of their interest level, and you hear about the stories that sort of got them to Tennessee and how their interest came about, I think, that it speaks a lot to the culture of what Tennessee has built. That word is thrown around a dime a dozen. And, every Tennessee team especially would like, would like you to know that their culture isn't just a cliche, that their culture is their culture. But I think with the Tennessee basketball team, there is something there a little bit with what Rick Barnes has created and the respect that Rick Barnes has around the coaching world. But it's also, Ryan, there's a bit of me that just kind of feels like, not that this was unexpected, not that this is necessarily surprising, but, critics back in the day, they like to say that they felt like Rick Barnes maybe wasn't a candidate that would be able to pivot to the transfer portal system. But I think he's done it, and he's been phenomenal at it. Obviously, I think the track record speaks for itself, but then being able to look at a guy like Gillespie and being able to look at a guy like Carey, and for them to want to be a part of the Tennessee program, that it's not some sort of bidding war necessarily. I don't exactly know what's going on behind the scenes, but it feels to me at least that they had Tennessee on their radar, and that they wanted to be challenged by Tennessee. I think it just speaks very highly of where this program is right now, and certainly the respect that Rick Barnes has cultivated over a long time around the league.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that, and certainly Tennessee's had a good deal of success in the portal the
Pretty
last
good
2
pitch.
years. Yeah, I mean, Tennessee's 4 of by far their 6 best players last year were guys that they landed in the portal at some point. Obviously, Jordan Gainey was a 2-year portal or a second-year portal guy. So, there's no doubt about that, and obviously the details of it are always a question. But I don't think there was much question that Tennessee was going to be active and a threat in the portal to do some good things and put together a roster that could be competitive after losing so many players. And obviously, we're really only not even quite at the halfway point of Tennessee doing that. So it'll be interesting to see what is next.
What is next for Tennessee? We will continue to break that down throughout the offseason. Obviously, the season is fresh in the books, really, as of last night, as we now have a new national champion. Ryan, we now live in a world once again where the Florida Gators are not only the SEC tournament champions, which, by the way, I've got a piece of confetti from that day in Nashville. It stuck to one of my pieces of electronics, and it's ended up on my desk. But they're also the national champions. Houston goes down, I believe, a 2-point loss. I believe a 12-point comeback from the Gators in that game. The final play was just tough. The final couple of possessions for Houston was just tough. I believe 3 turnovers and no shot attempts in the final, 30, 60 seconds, whatever it was. But what a tournament. Not a lot of madness, if you will. That was obviously a big talking point a couple of weeks ago after the first and second rounds. But a lot of chalk in this tournament. I believe the second straight tournament where Tennessee has been eliminated by somebody who was in the national championship game, if not the winner. Purdue, the previous 2 runner-ups.
Yes, that's exactly
runner-ups?
right. Runner-ups.
Runner-ups in the national championship. So if we're going to lose to anybody,
yes,
that's not the worst, right? There's no one better.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you make it to the Elite Eight, so there's, they're going to make it no worse to the
You're already
semifinal,
playing pretty good,
whoever you lose to.
Good point.
So, yeah, no, brutal loss for Houston. The last 3 possessions they had, they turned the ball over. That program's they've had a lot of national championship game heartbreak over the years, the only good news for them is, obviously in '83, they still got to watch every single NCAA tournament. As Lorenzo Charles dunked that air ball as time expired to beat him. The last play of this game was so ugly. They'll probably never show it again in any sort of NCAA tournament montage. That's probably the only win for Houston is when they flip on their TVs every March. They won't have to be reminded of how that game ended like they did back in '83.
He could have picked the ball up again, right? Once it
would have been a double dribble.
But once it hit the ground, would it still have been?
It would have still been a double dribble. Yeah.
Okay.
Now you could argue they were down by 2.
He started boxing out.
Yeah, he could have picked it up with like 3 seconds left, and you foul, maybe they miss one, and you get a half court shot. But in that moment, that's hard to
Yeah,
decide.
I
I mean, it
think
was a heck of a closeout by Walter Clayton. I mean,
yes.
and that I think is probably Emmanuel Sharp will go back and watch it back, and that's probably the brutal part. He pump faked and would have taken one dribble. He would have had a wide open three for the national championship. But again, you watch it back. I probably would, if I was in his shoes, I probably would have thought I would have had an open shot too.
Yeah.
Certainly an element of, I mean, as Rick Barnes loves to talk about affecting the game when you don't play well, and don't play well offensively. Walter Clayton was just so phenomenal. Carried Florida to the national championship game with his
Yeah. I
offensive
like him.
spectaculars or spectacles, and then he struggled for most of the night offensively. Certainly turned it on and had some big buckets late in the game too, but not to the same level he did. And then he makes the national championship winning play on the defensive end of the court. That's a great testament to what Rick Barnes and a lot of basketball coaches often talk about being locked into every aspect of the game, and not letting your offense dictate your defense.
And by the way, just one more quick little note on the way out. We are now 366 days removed. Yesterday, that was the anniversary of Kim Caldwell's first season at the helm of the Tennessee Lady Vols. Really energized the fan base and the team over the last year. I know we certainly did more Lady Vols coverage just by demand than we had in the last couple of the Kelly Harper era. And I'm not even sure what the records were, I guess, in comparison, but when I was writing about Kim Caldwell's first year yesterday, just Tennessee put up a nice sort of celebration video of that whole first year. They did have some really impressive moments during it to build on the 3-point record with, I believe, 30 plus. I think it was 30, but maybe 33, maybe 30 something threes in the game in the non-conference slate that they set the 3-point NCAA tournament record. The win over UConn was huge. Ryan, I believe you were in the building were you?
No.
Okay.
I was not.
Okay. It was a big one though. Obviously the pregnancy storyline and the childbirth in the middle of SEC play. I mean, there was just some phenomenal storylines that happened in that game. So Tennessee women's basketball, again, we don't do a lot of detailed coverage on them. But moving into a second year of the Kim Caldwell era with, I would imagine, a lot of excitement around where that program is headed as well. She just got a contract extension. Can't remember how much, but that happened last week.
Yep. No, that was. I mean, they beat the national champion, and boy,
did
UConn roll.
Gino might have won the championship, but hasn't beaten Kim Caldwell yet.
That's exactly right. So
I mean,
it'll be exciting to see what they do in the portal and how they build into year two with what should be at least seems like it would be a more talented roster.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to say this real quick on the way out. Thank you, everybody, for all the continued support during March Madness, whether it was online, whether it was on YouTube, whether it was on our podcast. And we had some monster numbers that we are very appreciative for, as it was obviously a lot going to those three places. But Ron and I had a great time doing it all. But again, we're just super appreciative for all the people that made us a routine part of your tournament watching experience, whether that be before the game, during the game, or after the game. We appreciate it very much. Now, the great thing about that is that the coverage does not stop. You just flip over sports. If you go to baseball, Ryan and Jack have a lot coming along the pipeline with Tony Vitello's baseball team, who falls out of the number one ranking after a series loss to Texas A&M. But certainly now the climb to get back to number one begins. Ryan, I think that's maybe where Tony Vitello, do you think he feels more comfortable on the climb, or do you think he feels more comfortable being at the top and sort of being able to defend off a little bit?
My natural instinct is to say to climb, but at the same time, they were number one team in the country for
That's a good point.
The final bit of the season
point.
last year. Not the entire season, but the back half of SEC play and into the postseason, and they won. So I would lend to say to climb, but it's not like he's bad as to hunt it either.
No, that's a fair point. History does speak fairly loudly for itself. Either way, Ryan and Jack have got you covered with the RTI Diamond Pass podcast, but also make sure you're following both of them for nonstop Tennessee baseball coverage as the summer months start to begin. Otherwise, it's going to wrap it up for us today. Hey, we still got a lot more football coming to you along the way. Orange and White game coverage coming up this Saturday over on RockyTopInsider.com. We will also have press conference video Tennessee baseball with the big weekend at Ole Miss we talked about a second ago. But just make sure you're subscribed to the RTI Press Pass podcast. You're subscribed to Rocky Top Insider on YouTube. That's a big one. And then make sure you're following us on social media platforms everywhere. You can follow Ryan at rshum00. You can follow myself at Rick_Butler. You can follow Jack at Jack Foster Media. Otherwise, it's going to wrap it up for us today. Ryan, thank you very much for all of your help today. Tennessee lands 2 big commitments in the transfer portal, but the work is not done yet. Head over to RockyTopInsider.com for all of your Tennessee basketball news, notes, and coverage. This has been the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass. See you back for the next one.